Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. This week is obviously a very exciting one, and hopefully the weeks to come as well. But we in the Apple community await the iPhone SE 4. We are getting some early glimpses into potentially the modem performance, but it's mostly coming from like unverified Twitter sources saying it's going to underperform the latest X71, X75 generation of modems that we see on the newer iPhones. I will cover the iPhone SE modem once the iPhone SE is actually available. I think right now it's very easy to just spew garbage, and then for the tech media, which includes me for somehow in this world, to pick this up. That's not what I'm gonna do today. We're gonna rely on our resident tech Jesus, Mark Gurman. Mostly, we'll be covering actually the broad range of Apple hardware that we expect to see throughout this year and maybe next year. I do hope my live stream is stable. I just got a USB C hub with Ethernet, so hopefully, if the internet ever was part of the issue, which it really wasn't, it was always more BS, that will help. I already see Relay joining the chat saying hi, Mark. Hi to everyone already joining. Thank you guys so much. I know the schedule has been a little bit irregular, but I have been able to stream a little bit more in recent times, so we've been able to get more comments, more likes, more shares, all that nice YouTube jazz. So if you can't do any of it, please do it. You can also help out this channel directly with a super chat or super sticker. You can also become a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve. And NMLV is joining saying, hey, Baba. I assume that's the Arabic for daddy or something like that. I haven't seen live in a while. Yeah, haven't seen your name definitely in like at least half a year or something like that. Except for maybe the M4 MacBook Pro and Mac Mini streams. There were so freaking many names. We had like 10 times the usual view count when that happened. So yeah. But thank you guys. Anybody who can join, it's very much appreciated. You guys know I love interacting with a lively live chat. So regular chat, super chat, whatever. Always glad to see you. So we actually have a range of topics to cover, and thank you to Mark Gurman yes, for presenting us all those news and rumors. But thank you specifically to Mac Rumors for summarizing most of them very early, because the Power On newsletter is just a pain in the butt to go through. Like I have to go to an archive site. I'm not gonna subscribe to it and should pay for it. Really, is the M5 catching up with N2, or is it the 10th year of N3? Seemingly, we are gonna be getting N3, most likely P chips, at the end of 2025, and then in 2026 we should be getting 2 nanometer processors. Should most likely Apple still be the first customer. There is a little bit of question because on the PC side there are rumors that Zen 6 will actually adopt 2 nanometer, but given the usual timeline for Zen processors, that would put it kind of ahead the iPhone of 2026. So yeah, again, not trying to be super predictive here. I still hope that we get some 2 nanometer Apple chips before then, but seemingly N3P is going to be most likely what's used, at least on the M5 series generation. What's the latest with our displays, man? Well, this is actually the kind of the latest we have gotten, right? Now, obviously, the studio display that we have right now dates back to 2022. The Pro Display XDR, technically superior to the studio's display, is actually older. So it's a big mess. But you have to consider, if Apple is targeting one very specific spec point, and that is above 4K resolution, which most likely is happening because Apple is using 5K or higher on 27-inch displays, 32-inch displays. That's what we have gotten thus far. Apple likes 220 pixels per inch on very large displays. And so the question is, what do you need to run those high resolution displays at a higher refresh rate than what we currently have, right? it's one thing to speculate about like mini LED or hell even tandem OLED for those displays, but Apple does not have a tandem OLED display out that is not ProMotion. Apple does not even have, outside the Pro Display XDR, which is really, really old, Apple does not have a mini LED screen that isn't ProMotion. So, was Apple always waiting for Thunderbolt 5? We cannot know. It will also depend, of course, if the displays launch and actually have or do not promotion. Most likely they will. But yeah, we are getting quite a bunch of rumors all together. I think that maybe now with like the year really starting in a way, Mark Gurman probably had some sources come in and say like, oh, Mark, you want to actually report this, right? Maybe somebody on the pro team at Apple, right, that was formed under John Turnus. Maybe those people really want to actually like leak whatever they're working on so that they get some excitement from the community. They can go back to Apple and show, that display successor that you keep pushing and pushing further and further away. Look at how many clicks it gets on the internet and stuff like that. So that will be interesting. Really, I thought they would be ready for a very late 2025. Technically, 2 nanometer as it is, yes. Some people, but. So I have said that when it comes to the A series chip that we're getting this year, the only chip that even remotely could be getting 2 nanometer would be just the A19 Pro. So from what I understand, there's basically zero chance that there's enough supply of 2 nanometer to give us the entire iPhone 17 lineup. iPhone 17, 17 Air, 17 Pro, 17 Pro Max. Now, conceivably, unless Apple pushes it to like November and the entire lineup, which really is not going to happen. But for the Pro lineup, it could so happen that maybe the 17 Pro and Pro Max get like delayed by a month and a half to maybe very late October. And then they launch with 2 nanometer. But that is purely speculation. This is me going on something like when you remember when the iPhone 12 launched, the iPhone 12 mini and the iPhone 12 Pro Max actually came out relatively late. And that had to do with them having basically more unique supplies of components, right? The Pro Max had the largest main camera sensor. The mini iPhone 12 had a thus far never used screen size at 5.4 inches, right? So maybe there was like just enough like overlap there where like the 12 and 12 Pro just took up so much supply of components, like the new 5G modems, what else was new on the iPhone 12? The A14 chip, of course, the first 5 nanometer processor in mass production. So maybe Apple could do something like that this year and give us like very significant time differences between like the regular models and the Pro models, and maybe the Air just launches on a completely different timeline. I do not expect that to happen though, but if we were to get 2 nanometer chips this year, this is how it would play out. And Angelica, one of our MarkTech Pro Max supporters, joining the chat saying she's very happy to see us all again. So am I. And a nice compliment towards me. Thank you. Don't like reading out compliments. They make me blush. So, but let's actually start with some smaller stuff, and let's go with chronological order. So obviously we know the iPhone SE4 or iPhone 16e or whatever it's going to be called is most likely coming out this Wednesday on February 19th. It's going to be powered by Apple's first in-house developed modem. It's going to be powered by the A18 chip, most likely. Let me for a second just make, by the way, myself a tiny bit smaller. I like my face, but not that much. We know we are getting iOS 18.4, probably in beta, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, or something like that. There is some news to cover about iOS 18 and supposedly an internal delay of certain features that were promised for iOS 18.4, but now will be coming in iOS 18.5. So we have a little bit of knowledge of what we can expect in the first half of 2025. However, one of those products we have been predicting, well, for a long time, and that is simply the M4 MacBook Air. And the reason why we can predict it relatively well is because we got the M3 MacBook Air in last March. So it stands to reason that we will get the M4 MacBook Air on a similar timeline. And in fact, this is being quote unquote confirmed. You guys know how I always treat that word here, by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting the pronunciation. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. I have no idea why I started doing this on the channel. And supposedly we are getting something by March. So it could still actually release in late February, which does make sense. I mean, when you consider like if we get the iPhone this Wednesday, maybe Apple could launch something exactly a week later and launch the MacBook Air by February 26th, or at least show it off. And then that week we get like early iPhone 17, iPhone SE4 reviews, and then the week after we get MacBook Air reviews, right? It would give Apple a nice like continued boom, boom, boom coverage through for the press to basically pay attention to Apple, which in the market they're very much like there's nonstop talk about AI, and Samsung just launched their latest Galaxy series, and Google I/O is not too far off, right? Apple does need something to stay in the market cycle, in the marketing cycle, in the media cycle. And I do believe that something like this definitely will help, especially since the MacBook Air is still Apple's best-selling laptop. Like, it's a bit cheaper than the MacBook Pro. It just got disproportionately actually better value increases than the MacBook Pro, because saving $200 on a $1,600 device is nice. That it prevents you from paying 1/8 more to double your RAM, but doing so on a $1,000 product, even something like the M2 MacBook Air, that's an even better value increase in my opinion. This is why the Mac Mini has been such a huge thing, because it might start at $600, but since you most likely would want to pair it with 16 gigabytes of RAM, previously it kind of almost was by default an $800 product, and that made it 33%, in fact 33.333% more expensive than the MSRP. Now you still have to pay extraordinary amounts of money to get more storage, but at least the Mac Mini is a very stationary device. You can kind of permanently dock it to some external storage solution, so that's a little bit less of an issue. So this is why I'm saying the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini are actually getting very, very exciting now that Apple is willing to give us a bit more value than usual. They will still try to maintain their 30, sometimes even 40% margins. But if you are somebody who is willing to go with like a base version of a device, then you're actually getting pretty much the best value you have ever gotten from Apple. So, but let's see what Mark Gurman exactly had to say. Again, this is all part of the Power newsletter. It does apply to both the 13 and 15-inch MacBook Air. Now, again, this has something to do with that. The reason why I covered this at all is when the M2 MacBook Air came out, it didn't immediately come out in both sizes. The 15-inch Air kind of came out later, and the 15-inch Air came out actually so late that it was pretty close to the launch of the M3 MacBook Air. So Apple is right now committed to updating their MacBook Airs very, very simultaneously. So these types of delays that we saw with the M2s, that came from the fact that, well, we previously did not have a 15-inch MacBook Air. So this 6 days ago, Gurman claimed that the machines would be introduced within weeks, which does, of course, line up with like by March, whether that means anywhere from right now to the end of March. That's like 4.5, 5, 6 weeks. Gives you definitely still plenty of time to say, yep, this does line up with what Mark Gurman has predicted. So, of course, we're also getting the iPhone SE 4. Most likely coming out this Wednesday. And we have found already snippets of code in the latest macOS Sequoia file suggesting that we are getting successors to the M3 MacBook Air. Again, this happens every time. I think we already have like markers even for like technically what would be the next iPad Pro or something like that. So that does not say that we are actually expected to see those products anytime soon, but sometimes it does. So I guess it's better than nothing, right? So we have the Mark Gurman reports, we have the codes inside the latest operating system versions. And it just makes sense. Launching it by March will allow Apple to still sell them at full price to early adopters, people who might even have the money for a more expensive, higher quality MacBook Pro, better speakers, better sustained active cooling, stuff like that. But there are plenty of people who just want the thinnest MacBook possible. So to them, even something like the 15-inch MacBook Air will be pretty cool. And if Apple especially goes the route of giving us an extra USB-C port on the other sides, and of course multiple display functionality that we got with the M4 MacBook Pro, that is going to make those devices more versatile, more attractive to a slightly more pro audience. So to me, that's actually very exciting. And then sometime right around that and a bit later, we should be getting the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro. But it's really getting late because those are premium desktops. Like there's like the MacBook Air obviously can come out after the MacBook Pro, kind of how the iPhone SE can launch after the regular iPhone and the iPhone Pro. The Mac Studio and the Mac Pro coming out close to a year potentially after the MacBook Pro with the same generation of processors is very weird to me. And it gets even worse because obviously the next Mac Studio and Mac Pro will be powered by M4 generation processors that we should be getting pretty soon after that release, M5 MacBook Pros. So at this point, I really hope Apple just skips another gen with the Mac Studio and Mac Pro and just finally commits to launching them almost simultaneously with the MacBooks. Look, I'm fine if they come out like 3-4 months later, but everything that is half a year or more delayed after the M4, or in this case, then later after the M5 or the M6, it just puts them way too close to the upcoming generation. And if you've seen, for example, that the M4 Max is faster than the M2 Ultra in almost every way except for regular GPU performance. It is actually, I believe, technically faster in ray tracing because it has hardware accelerated ray tracing. That to me is just like ludicrous. But let's actually get to the more positive stuff first. So according again to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, we are supposedly getting the M5 MacBook Pro this fall, and then it will be followed up by an M5 iPad Pro in the first half of 2026. This is very interesting because obviously we got the M4 iPad Pro in the first half of 2024, so that will make it a 2-year delay. Now we are saying of M5 iPad Pro, though technically, if we judge by what happened last year, there is a chance that maybe the iPad actually gets the M6 chip first, and some of you have already asked like 2 nanometer. M6 is definitely a 2 nanometer chip. So if Apple launches like the iPad in May or something like that of 2026, basically what they did in 2024 with the M4 iPad Pro, maybe that could work. But the main focus of this report by Mark Gurman is on the M5 MacBook Pro that fully lines up with the M4 MacBook Air launching in November of last year. The M3 MacBook Pro also came out on a similar timeline. Let me actually look that up. M3 MacBook Pro wiki. Yeah, it came out in October of 2023. So was introduced with the MacBook Pro. It's interesting that we get like wiki results for the Apple Silicon chips actually, but not the devices. By the way, looking at OBS, we're still at 0 frame drops and everything seems to be going smoothly. But as always, let me know what the audio quality is for you. Suggest any topics. You guys see, I love interacting with your live chat. If you want to participate, if you have questions, suggestions, it's all very, very much appreciated. Jan Hendrik, moin moin. Eating dumplings while watching. Well, bon appetit to you, sir. I always have to, like, for any German viewer, and sometimes we have like people chatting in Russian or Ukrainian, and my brain just has to process it very quickly. But thank you so much for joining. Looking at the MacBook Pro here. So Gurman's latest claim flips the previously expected order of devices. Again, we did expect the iPad Pro. Granted, that mostly came from the release last year, but who knows how that will play out. But we expected the iPad Pro to still predate the MacBook Pro. Now, it could be that N3P just isn't ready before like the September iPhone launch and later an October, November MacBook Pro launch. It's also interesting that we're talking here only about the MacBook Pro, so no mentions of like an updated Mac Mini or an updated iMac, which were of course updated last fall with the M4 generation of chips. And very likely once we're getting the M5, we're also looking at the launch of the M5 Pro and the M5 Max. That's how Apple has been handling the last 2 generations. So it's always interesting to see Mark Gurman not being fully committed. There's always room, of course, for some stuff to change in Apple's lineup and in their timeline, but I don't think it will. It's especially not if they're going with N3P, which does not present any meaningful logistical issues to Apple. Before the release of M5 MacBook Pro models, Gurman says that Apple will launch updates to the Mac Studio and Mac Pro. Those machines could arrive around Apple's annual WWDC in June of 2025. Now, the reason why we are kind of dating them around it is that historically, actually, plenty of more Pro-focused Macs and other Apple devices have launched at WWDC. I wouldn't put it past Apple. The reason why I don't usually expect hardware WWDCs, well, at this point, is not actually because I think that WWDC is I don't think it needs it, to be honest. Apple now has iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS, visionOS. They have a plethora of apps from iWork to iLife to their more pro stuff like Logic and Final Cut. Like they have all their small apps like the new Sports app, the new Invites app. Even Freeform, God knows, needs some continued love and things like that, right? I think that keeping WWDC a software-only conference honestly doesn't hurt it at this point. So if Apple really wants to go all out and just make this year's WWDC a big surprise, they can, but I don't think they have to. Here's something that we have actually read like 4 times, because Mac Rumors keeps copy pasting this piece into every report that mentions the M5 processor. So basically, judging by previous reports, M5 will have TSMC's third generation of 3 nanometer, which of course is going from N3B to N3E to now N3P, which should roughly be between 5 and 10% more powerful or efficient, depending on how Apple is going to utilize the silicon, plus whatever gains Apple can achieve on an architectural level, including more cache, stuff like that, changing clock speeds, whatever. Now, 2 nanometers supposedly is not being used for cost reasons. That to me is honestly a weird discussion, because Apple will still gonna use 2 nanometer. Unless the suggestion is that Apple can get lower prices from TSMC by saying, you know what, we actually believe we can wait. We might not trust your logistics by like late 2025. Give us a 2 nanometer by sometime in mid 2026, but give us 5, 10, 15% low prices, right? But I don't really see that happening, because if 2 nanometer is legitimately better, my only speculation is that 2 nanometer might not be enough of an uplift over N3P right away. And that would line up a little bit with what we saw with N3B, which, yes, N3B was better than TSMC's N4 node at the same time. But then we also had technically N4P. Yeah, still 5, 10, maybe even 15% worse, but dramatically cheaper than N3B, dramatically better yields, and an already figured out logistics pipeline. Unless 2 nanometer has those same issues where it's like 40% more expensive for 10% gains, I don't really see Apple being very stingy on it. Jan, you're asking if the M4 is 3 nanometer. It's not only 3 nanometer, it's already second generation 3 nanometer. It goes N3B for the A17 chips, or technically the one chip, the A17 Pro. The iPad mini has like the A17 Pro with one GPU core disabled, and for the M3 generation of chips. And then N3E for the A18 and A18 Pro chips, and the M4 generation of chips. So M4, M4 Pro, M4 Max. So yeah, you have a very good device, believe me. Just so freaking thirsty today. So some people have also talked about TSMC's SOIC tech. That's a more advanced packaging technology. I looked it up on TSMC's website. It seems to me, at least on first glance, maybe I should do more research, focused on multi-die solutions. And some people have said it does not apply at all to the M5, but which makes sense. The base M series chips are monolithic. But then it would help the M5 Pro and above. That kind of confuses me, because the M5 Pro and the M5 Max are monolithic chips. It's only the Ultras that are multi-die solutions. I don't know if I'm missing something, if SOIC can be used for monolithic solutions in some way, and like maybe for 3D cache, but that's not really what that tech is used for. Or alternatively, that supposedly M5 Pro and M5 Max might be the first multi-die chips when it comes to Apple Silicon that aren't Ultra. which does come with its own can of worms, unfortunately. Yes, multi-die solutions have their benefits. You're not limited as much by the reticle limit. So actually, when you go down with your process node and you make the transistor smaller, theoretically, with each generation, you reduce the maximum die space that you can target. Now, seemingly, it's not as big of an issue. We are getting like gigantic, for example, 4 nanometer dice on the RTX 5090. Even if 3 nanometer at 20% smaller reticle limits than that, and then 2 nanometer was another 15 or 10% smaller, those would still be dice more than large enough for like M4 Max. So, again, I couldn't really tell you, but seemingly this tech gets mentioned. I hope that maybe by some point, somebody who is both a leaker and also a little bit more knowledgeable about technology actually asks somebody in Apple's supply chain about, like, look, which chips are actually SoIC? What does it mean for those chips? And how big of a benefit is it at all, right? So it basically, what it does, it vertically stacks chips, helps with thermal management, reduces their electrical leakage. Apple is said to have expanded its cooperation with TSMC on the next gen hybrid SoIC package, which also combines thermoplastic carbon fiber composite molding tech. That I know absolutely nothing about. You guys know I'm a medical professional. I have zero clue about what any of these words mean in their combination. Yes, I could define you each word individually, but that's not going to help you. References to what are believed to be Apple's M5 chip have already been discovered in official Apple code. So this is what I'm trying to say. Never try to like look at, oh, Apple software includes like references to a chip coming out like supposedly a year later. Does that mean that chip is actually coming out in a few months? No, it can still mean it's coming out in a year or so, because these chips are in development for quite a long time usually. And while, yeah, usually their code names appear around a year or so before the official launch in software, it can happen way earlier than that. Technically, like 2 years wouldn't even be too crazy if it showed up first. Yeah, so that goes from the M4 MacBook Air to the M5 MacBook Pro. Now, again, we do say iPad Pro. So technically, if the iPad Pro comes out by like May 2026, maybe it actually gets promoted, quote unquote, to like M6. That would make it definitely the first product on the market with 2 nanometer. It would also reflect, in my opinion, a better generational uplift. Like, I personally don't see much of a need to have an M4 iPad Pro upgrade that goes up to the M5. Like, don't get me wrong, more performance is always better, but especially if M5 potentially increases power consumption, why not stay on an M4 for the iPad Pro and maybe just reduce pricing or give us more storage at any given price point, double the RAM as you did for the MacBooks? I think those things would be far more exciting. There's nothing coming even close to the experience of the M4. Like, I know some people do want to hype up something like the Ryzen AI Max chips, right? But those are 4 nanometer. They're RDNA 3.5. And yeah, Zen 5 is not a bad architecture, but it's definitely not beating out M4 in terms of like single core performance or multi core efficiency, any of that. So yeah, Apple can technically keep the M4 iPad Pro and then just give it a massive boost to 2 nanometer. Again, with 2 nanometer, it's very confusing in that regard, because 2 nanometer is very quickly going to be followed up to the point that the year after 2 nanometer is actually going to be very confusing. I want the image. Give me the image. There it is. Oh, is that from when Anantag was still alive? Jesus, that's so sad. N2P. No, that's actually not the latest anymore. Is that it? Wait, is that the latest one? Yeah. You do have to pay a lot to get a lot of performance on Windows. Technically, you can go with something like Threadripper processors on desktop, right? Now, granted, the motherboards there are a lot more expensive. You need more memory to make it work really well. And then with single core performance, you still get nowhere near to like the M4 generation. So yeah, it's like, of course, you can get very cheap GPUs even on the PC side in a way that Apple simply cannot match. But at that point, you're dealing with like RTX 3000 generations, RTX 2000 generations, and then you're dealing with potentially worse drivers than the latest gens. You're dealing with far worse efficiency. You have to get a system that's far better cooled, or you get something relatively low end. So yeah, not saying that the PC space obviously offers a lot, but just trying to be realistic here. There's plenty that definitely Apple right now is delivering with Apple Silicon that I think not everyone can match. That's the one I was looking at. That's what the one I was looking at. Jesus, all those ads. So, 2 nanometer is supposedly coming in the second half of 2025. Again, this is when it's hitting like higher production levels. Technically, that still makes it very much a 2026 kind of product. Apple could like realistically push it to a degree where it's in 2025 still. But look, for example, at N3E, right? N3E was a late 2023 product, but the actual first device with N3E, the M4 iPad Pro, came out in the first half, very end of first half of 2024. So N3P, while yes, optimistically it's the second half of 2024 technology, it makes sense for it to launch late 2025. If you apply the same logic going forward, just add one extra year, right? It's not too crazy. And especially for N2, which is their first change to GAFET, gate all around transistors. So while it might not even be the biggest jump in terms of performance or efficiency, but it is one of the largest architectural differences we've ever had. Plus, we actually see some nice improvements in density in cache, which we haven't seen actually in a while. So this is logic density. So there's a separate metric for cache density. And one thing that, for example, sucked about the TSMC 3 nanometer generation was that it actually didn't improve cache density over 5 nanometer. Supposedly we're getting 10-15% density improvement on N2. So that will help either add more cache or potentially keep chips a little bit smaller than they otherwise would be, and which in a node that's potentially super duper expensive, that becomes really important. And also with a node that might have not as big of a reticle limit as before, once you are targeting like 400-500 square millimeter processors, there's a good chance that any improvement to both logic and cache density might make the difference between like, can I even build that chip or not, or can I build that chip with decent yields or not, which all matters. But what I was going to cover here is what's funny is N2P, which is a relatively small uplift over N2, right? It's, if you subtract those things, right, it's 5 or to 10% better, but it's a decent 1 year jump. And it's coming out exactly 1 year later, which fully lines up with the schedule that we have gotten thus far. But A16 is supposedly coming out on the same schedule. It's H2, so second half of 2026. This to me suggests honestly that 2 nanometer might, like, it could be that both N2 and N2P are kind of like N3, which ended up being called N3B. Um, and that A16, which gets actually a backplane power delivery and all those big changes that we associate actually with a switch to GAFET, it might be that Apple will just go all out in this and get A16, maybe actually like a year after 2 nanometer, and then the rest of the industry gets 2 nanometer and N2P, while Apple just enjoys their relationship with TSMC and says, look, we might not have been too excited about N2, we might have gotten it like half a year to even a year later than we could have, but we want A16 ready for the 2020 for the 2027 iPhones, right? But again, it will depend. Uh, you never know how it plays out. Stuff gets delayed, some stuff launches surprisingly early. It's really hard to say, especially since TSMC, now that they are the absolute undisputed master of this industry, they do not like to give like predictions by the month of when they're starting production or something like that. That's They don't need to do that anymore. But that's about it for this specific detail. Um, yeah, that's basically it. Again, uh, this is actually something that is more interesting to me than I think is to most of you. And it does actually make more sense to me with the integration of the SOIC rumor. So I don't know if maybe you should decouple this from the regular M5 gen and just think about it as a technology for Apple's private cloud compute AI servers. But according to one report, thanks to its dual use SOIC design, Apple also plans to deploy the M5 chip within its AI server infrastructure. And again, I do not really see a point of deploying the regular M5. So maybe it's about the Ultra, or maybe it's about using SOIC to even combine like Pro and chips too, and even base M series chips. So this is really something that I would love to see further details from somebody who actually understands that. And this is, in an era like this is why I am so bummed out about like an Antec not being there, because I think this is a rumor that an Antec would really be eating up, right? Not only do we have all that crazy stuff happening right now, where we are getting rumors that like Broadcom might want to buy the Intel chip design business, that TSMC might want to buy Intel's foundries, and basically that would be the end of Intel as we know it. Plus, we have all that new tech where, with like slightly weird timelines, I just wish we had more experts in the industry that were willing to comment on this stuff. I know there are people, some are way too PC focused to even care that Apple might, like whenever it's Apple is first, I feel like these people just ignore the latest TSMC tech for a year or so, which is a bummer too. So yeah, let's see how it all plays out. Regardless, the regular M5 supposedly coming by late 2025, and then an iPad Pro, whether M5 or M6 based, in the first half of 2026. Does all make sense considering what we have seen in the last couple of years. That's a little bit more long-term prediction. Obviously, in the short term, expect the M4 MacBook Air. Now, speaking of more long-term predictions, the Studio Display, or whatever is going to be the successor to the Pro Display XDR, whether we are looking at several different products or one product kind of sitting in the middle. Like, let's not forget, technically Apple could make a Studio Display Pro or something like that if they really wanted to, and make it more expensive to make up for technologies like mini LED being included, and of course ProMotion, relying on Thunderbolt 5, things like that. At that point, it would get so expensive, honestly, that I'm not sure if it would be very attractive. But if you consider that the Pro Display XDR is $5,000, let's say it gets updated to a 6K 120 hertz Pro Display XDR with way more local dimming zones, but it stays at $5,000-$6,000. and then the current studio display is like 13. What is the price? Is it $1,600 by default? I know you can regularly get a discount at around 1,300. Yeah, it's 15.99. So technically, there would be room for like a $3,000 Studio Display Pro, because when you look at the Pro Display XDR at its price, I believe it's $49.99, and that's without the $1,000 stand, which seemingly every YouTuber sees worth us buying. So again, however you want to see it, that's again, I hope that it's really a successor to the Studio Display at preferably the same price, but at least close to it. But there is some room for it, especially if they also update the Pro Display XDR. So while I got the my own personal predictions out of the way, let me actually talk about some good stuff. Again, coming from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, we are looking at the successor to the Studio Display here, not the Pro Display XDR. So whether that means there is no successor to the Pro Display XDR, or he simply does not know it, or if it's coming out at a completely different timeline than this product. But this is more for the Studio Display customers than the Pro Display customers. Of course, that would be a long time to wait, since the last one debuted in 2025 and 2022. It lacks all the great tech that Apple has introduced even before it came out. For example, the 2021 MacBook Pros already featured technologies like mini LED. And when you look at something like the 2017 iPad Pro, Apple has had ProMotion for a while, especially on LCD panels. Later then, of course, LTPO and LTPO iPhone. So quite a lot of nice tech there. Now, last week, one of my favorite leakers in the Apple sphere, or technically he's in the display business, but Apple ships a lot of devices with display. So Ross Young is quite of use to us in the Apple community when it comes to that. He reported that Apple is working on a new Studio Display with mini LED display tech. So he did not specify things like resolution or refresh rate or the reliance on technology like Thunderbolt 5. But mini LED definitely would be a good improvement. The Pro Display XDR has local dimming zones, not too many. I believe it's 576 or something like that. In comparison, like the iPad Pro, like that has a way smaller screen, before switching to tandem OLED, had like over 2,000 zones. So that's like 16 times the density or something like that. So we are definitely overdue an update for the mini LED on the Pro Display XDR, and the regular Studio Display just never had it. So even getting the relatively low local dimming zone density of the Pro Display XDR would be an update for it. But we have also never seen as low of a dimming zone density again after the Pro Display. So the Pro Display really stands alone, almost like kind of like a prototype in technology that Apple launched to appease enthusiasts and prosumers at the time. I'm told that Apple is currently testing prototypes of a display codenamed J427 that should arrive by 2026. Now again, by 2026 could mean also like late 2025. It could be late 2026 by all we know, but a lot of recent rumors have pointed that we might actually still be getting something in 2025. That to me, though, does make sense, because if Apple gives Thunderbolt 5 to the entire M5 MacBook Pro lineup, right? Currently, Thunderbolt 5 is limited to the M5 Pro and M5 Max devices. So that could greatly expand how many people can access it. But even if it's just on the M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pros, that is still another generation and another wave of buyers who would be able to access this display at its fullest, especially if it truly is like 5K mini LED and ProMotion at the same time. It will be a successor to the current Studio display rather than the Pro Display XDR, and feature a design that's similar to the 2022 model. Yeah, honestly, I don't see much of a reason for Apple to switch designs with the Studio display, because I don't know if Apple might feel the need to do some active cooling on it, like what they did with the perforated design of the back on the Pro Display XDR. Jesus, show me the actual display, right? But this looks nice. It's an all aluminum construction. Maybe Apple can make the bezel a little bit smaller. Oh, we definitely could use a better camera. One thing that I've actually speculated on is that this device might be powered by the A16 processor. So if you know, the Studio display actually features the A13 chip. It features it for its stereo speakers, for its microphones, and for its front-facing center stage selfie camera. And what's funny is that obviously the A13 is ridiculously overpowered for something like that, but it actually wasn't doing too good of a job for the selfie camera because its ISP was pretty outdated. I wish Apple found a way to make it a lot better by just relying on the CPU and the GPU power of the A13, but seemingly they probably didn't want to change their algorithms. The A16, which is the same chip as, for example, on the iPhone 14 Pro and the regular iPhone 15, that chip should definitely be able to handle whatever camera you throw at it inside this kind of display. Yes, it might not have the HDR processing of the A17 Pro and the A18, but I don't think that will be a big problem in this specific product. Yeah, but otherwise we don't actually have too much to go on. So my hope that it's a full-on replacement for the Studio display, hopefully with no or very small price increase, and hopefully by also fixing some of the silliness here. Again, I still get pissed off. Like, that nano texture glass price is not bad. I wish it was more like $200 rather than $300. But then you go to like the stands and you just have to pay so much freaking money for a height adjustable stand, because again, the tilt adjustment already comes with the standard stand. Ugh. This is such a bummer to me, because this stuff makes Apple feel a little bit ridiculous sometimes. Even if this was just like a $200 upgrade. Okay, it's an all aluminum stand, and it had like full functionality like the Pro Display XDR stand. But like $400 just for extra height adjustment, I do not support that. But yeah, I know some people genuinely don't really care about that price difference, but I do believe that you still like, it's just something that gets covered by the media, by reviewers. I think you just look ridiculous and way too greedy in a way that you don't even look when you overcharge for storage and RAM, because at least with storage and RAM, we understand this is where you make your margins, and it's margins that you make across the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, right? The higher storage config you get, the more RAM you get in the device, we know you keep more money basically. But doing this for like an optional stand upgrade for a niche display, that I don't like that. At least the Pro Display XDR. Now, granted, that $1,000 stand was always ridiculous, but let's even say that stand would have been $500 and would have been like 10% of the price of the display. I think that would have been pretty acceptable to like the pro market that you're targeting. But the $1,000, that's ridiculous. Asking $400 for height adjustment is also ridiculous. Let me quickly look if maybe we got something like iOS 18 or something like that. Nope, not thus far. So Next is a rumor that's actually not very big by itself, but it does now line up with a lot of other leaks and rumors that we have been getting in recent times. And they are kind of starting to come together to form a comprehensive image, in my opinion. And that goes to the iPhone 17 design. Now, that has to do with the 17 Air and the 17 Pro. We don't actually know if the entire 17 lineup will have a redesign. There are rumors that the iPhone 17, the base model, will look pretty much identical to the iPhone 16. And it's the Air and the Pros that start a new generation of designs. Primarily for the Airs, we are looking at that elongated bar across the entire iPhone's width, which looks a little bit funny to me for a device that has only one camera, like no LiDAR scanner like the Pro models. But I mean, Apple probably wants to give the Air like different design elements just to make it stand out more. It's not my favorite choice. I still am very apprehensive about the 17 Air in general as an idea. But with the Pros, we obviously did cover. Like the rumors that they weren't started by Front Page Tech, but Front Page Tech thus far has been the largest leaker to commit to this like both taller and of course way longer camera bar that still houses that triangular camera arrangement with the LED flash and the LiDAR scanner being at the complete other side of the iPhone. My speculation was that basically the elevated glass here just gives Apple a few more cubic millimeters here and there to improve everything from coolings, modems, speakers, front cameras. Again, this is all very speculative. We were never told how much Apple will fill up that little space that gets added. But if there's one benefit that I could see to that design, except for the opportunity to put your finger on here when you're holding it, that's what comes to my mind. But yeah, Digital Touch Station, who has talked about other leaks and rumors in the past, who has sometimes been the first, does kind of agree with that. So a horizontal bar-shaped design on the rear for the iPhone 17 Air and a large horizontal matrix design for the Pros. Again, no rumors for about the regular 17 models. That seemingly does not commit to previous rumors like the use of like dual tone finishes, like one part being glass, one part being metal. But however you see it, there is definitely an expected design change for the 17 family that we have not gotten over the last few years. Whether you like it or not, that's a very different discussion. I'm here to cover this. And speaking of things you might not like, let's talk about iOS 18.4 delaying certain features until iOS 18.5. So we apparently websites like Mac Rumors, they obviously can view which operating system you use, and apparently they have seen the first few logins with devices using iOS 18.5. That comes after reporting from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman that Apple was considering delaying or limiting some of the promised AI features for Siri that were supposed to come in iOS 18.4 to iOS 18.5. However, we do not know how many of those features are being delayed, which ones exactly. Obviously, with iOS 18.4, we are supposedly getting a much smarter Siri. We're getting the more global rollout for Apple Intelligence, including meeting regulatory guidelines in the European Union and China. But there will be other features like on-screen awareness, personal context, and deeper per-app controls. So we don't know which one of those features specifically will be delayed. I believe some have said that, like, especially the on-screen awareness is kind of hit or miss. So it might just be that iOS 18.4 launches and it's primarily about the more global release of Apple Intelligence. But if like it depends when iOS 18.5 comes out. I've seen some people already acting all outraged. They're saying, "Oh my god, June is WWDC. What are like basically you're launching the new Siri right at the time when iOS 19 gets shown." Yeah, but when iOS 19 gets shown, iOS 19 is not launching before September. Um, so even if this launches in June, and I think it's more of a May release, I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Again, I'm always for waiting rather than for pushing through and launching features half baked. I know that Apple Intelligence has seen plenty of delays by this point, but don't forget that these delays have kind of been almost baked in. Like Apple Intelligence itself launched late in comparison to the rest, but Apple promised Apple Intelligence for iOS 18. It ended up coming out with iOS 18.1 a month later, basically, and then a few more features in iOS 18.2. And Apple has always said that Smarter Siri is for sometime in 2025. Then they kind of confirmed that it would be coming out in April. Granted, Apple has talked about a smarter Siri and a global release. They did not specifically promise that every single of those announced features will launch by then. So even if you like look at the specific timeline of Apple Intelligence, then realistically everything got delayed by a month, right? It got delayed basically from September to October. For the very first launch of Apple Intelligence in the United States in English with limited functionality. Then we got a few more English-speaking countries and stuff like that, and a few more functionalities, Image Playground, Genmoji, stuff like that. And now features that were promised for April are probably coming out sometime in May. Again, these are not bad things to me if that means these features actually launch pretty well made. I also see like some hypocrisy here where people will just really hyper focus on every delay, but and I believe I've covered that in the previous stream, right? One UI 7 delay. So One UI 7 obviously is on the latest Galaxy S25 series. It's in no other Android device. It is being in beta on the Galaxy S24 series. And after we kind of all expected it would be basically delayed by a month. So if you count One UI 7 as the official release on the Galaxy S25, then it's a late January thing. So by late February, we were kind of expecting to get One UI 7 on other Samsung devices, at least the Galaxy S24 family. To be honest, in a fair market, it would be way more than just the Galaxy S24 lineup. But now it's been delayed basically to like April. And that's just for the Galaxy S24. That's no word about like when the Galaxy S23 or 22 or 21, which are all generations that are supposedly getting One UI 7 and Android 15, are getting One UI 7. And even funnier than that is that Android 16 is already in early beta. So this year, basically, Google just launched the latest Android version way earlier. Seemingly, there are some deeper system changes that made it more advantageous to, instead of making like an Android 15.1 or 15.2, they instead jumped straight away to Android 16. And yes, if you have a Pixel device, you can already install that beta. And while yes, that beta does not have yet very many features, you can install it down to the Pixel 6th generation. While with Samsung, you either get the absolute latest gen in terms of hardware, or you get last gen and use a beta. And that beta testing period gets extended by like 2 months. Well, everything Apple Intelligence, yes, has seen some delays. I'm not denying that. But to me, it's just very funny how people will be like, oh, Apple Intelligence, it's all false marketing and shit like that. Meanwhile, Samsung is pulling shit like that, and somehow nobody cares. And I just dislike that hypocrisy. I'm not saying that to defend Apple or to deflect. I don't even mind that Samsung is delaying One UI 7. I do not like that the Galaxy S23, 22, God forbid, God knows when S21 would ever get it. So I don't like that these devices are disconnected from the beta schedule for the S24. But if they all got it like 2 months, even 3 months later, if Samsung said, you know what, we optimized it for a latest piece of hardware, but by May we are promising every Galaxy that can get One UI 7, so that's down to the S21, will get it, I would be like, fine. But these extended beta periods and that very limited nature of those beta periods, that just doesn't sit right with me. So we are basically finished. Seemingly, iOS 18.4 has still yet not launched in beta. Um, by the way, I've talked about it before. I don't know what the storage configuration will be for the iPhone SE4. I know some people are claiming they are like early pricing leaked or whatever. It's so easy to fake that shit, and sometimes websites will even like make up mock-ups even before something comes out. So that does not, and not officially, right? They'll just base it on their own predictions. However you want to see it, I'm just like, I'm not going to cover like the storage predictions for the iPhone SE4, especially not if it's coming in 2 days. So this is actually something that I have not been able to even know that it exists. It's a 5-minute-old rumor. It's coming from Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw. It reports that Spotify is still working on a pricier version of its streaming music subscription, and Apple might not be too far behind. Spotify is developing a more expensive version of its service that will offer higher quality audio, concert tickets, and tools that let subscribers edit songs. So for Apple, higher quality audio is already integrated with the default pricing of Apple Music. The company is calling it Music Pro, at least for now, and aims to roll out the package later this year, priced at about $6 a month more than its current subscriptions. That would put it at $17 a month. Meanwhile, Apple Music offers lossless audio in the standard Apple Music tier. Music Pro will include several different remixing tools, speed up or mash up songs. Would Apple really need that? Like, would you really want that stuff in the music app rather than like a separate editing software? The integration for stuff like ticket selling to me makes sense. But at what point do you need to pay extra for that? Like, just keep a small 5% commission or something like that. Yeah. So what about Apple? As mentioned, Apple Music has long offered higher resolution audio. So they went from $9.99 a month to $11 in 2022. Shaw adds that Apple and Amazon are similarly investigating ways to charge more for higher tiers. Apple and Apple Music have also talked about more expensive tiers for their apps, though their plans are more nascent and may not come to fruition. Okay, so it's a little bit like that very recent Apple Maps ads report where, like, yeah, at some point Apple might integrate ads into Apple Maps. And to be quite honest, I'm not even fully against that, because if you understand, we live in a fully digital world. There comes a time where local businesses will have to advertise digitally for themselves, and doing so on Google as Google search will just make less sense than doing it right in the Maps app. Now, of course, I would want those maps to be highly controlled in quality, eat up as little bandwidth as possible. Hell, if my internet is slow, I would even want them to shut off. So it would be it would have to be done very well, which honestly, I don't trust anyone with that, not even Apple. So, but I do see a path to it, to how it can make sense. But supposedly it's so early that it's basically impossible to tell when or if it's going to come out. And that sounds a little bit like that to me too. Yeah, but that's about it for today. We've actually covered quite a plethora of rumors about upcoming Apple hardware. I'm not sure if I'll be able to stream tomorrow, but if there is something actually exciting, I'll find time for that. Now, if iOS 18.4 releases tomorrow, which most likely would be at 6, 7 p.m. my time, at that point, I would probably be more busy actually installing and testing it rather than making a report about it. But then I will definitely be back on Wednesday. I have planned a short work day that day, so I can react instantly unless it launches like before 1 p.m. my time. But I'll be able to react to the iPhone SE launch whenever it comes out. So I'm very happy about that. Maybe I'll be able to stream a little bit on Thursday. I know that will probably do very good for the channel if I can stream a few days in a row. But then on Friday, I'm off to visiting family and friends. So, which I have been doing quite a lot recently, but I'm not apologizing for that. I really appreciate the extra me time that I've been able to find recently. Thank you all guys so much for joining, for chatting, for liking, for sharing, for subscribing, all the YouTube jazz. Whenever you catch me live, consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker to directly support the channel. Of course, you can become also a supporter over on Patreon or direct supporter right here on YouTube. However you choose to engage with me, the community, it's all very welcome. Keep your eyes out for the stream on Wednesday. And as always, let me know what you would also like to see me cover beyond that. This is Mark Tech, seeing you on Wednesday and tuning out.